Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's James Dunlop. I'm a senior engineer with the Carbon Trust. I've been here for around 8 years, and during that time I've developed quite a bit of experience in the retail sector. So in terms of today's webinar, we're going to split the session up and go through a range of technology issues in the sector. Firstly, we're going to look at lighting, and then HVAC, heating, ventilation and air conditioning. We'll then have a break just to round up on the Green Business Fund, and for those businesses who have an interest in refrigeration, we'll then continue on to cover off on that section. Should you not have an interest in this, there's an opportunity then to leave the webinar at that stage. So in terms of the Carbon Trust, we're a not-for-profit organisation with a mission to accelerate the move to a sustainable low-carbon economy. We provide advice to businesses, government and the public sector, and also provide footprinting services to organisations and for products and services. In addition, we develop and deploy low-carbon technology and solutions. In terms of today's webinar, the aim is to provide an understanding of where energy is used in the retail environment, to establish what low and no cost measures can be taken straight away, and then to look at other options to improve lighting, energy efficiency, the efficiency of your heating, ventilation and air conditioning systems, and also to improve efficiency on the refrigeration systems. And I'll also give more information then on the Green Business Fund and the support that can be provided through that scheme. So in general, we'd find that retailers can save around 20% or more through proven and effective technology improvements. So there's a lot of opportunity to reduce your energy overhead. And put into the retail context, it's often useful to think about how the impact of energy savings will affect your business. So looking at a typical business with annual sales of around £1 million a year, they might be operating with a net margin of 5%, generating £50,000. If their energy costs were to be as high as £20,000 and they were then to save 20% of that energy, that would equate to a saving of around £4,000 a year. So if you think of that saving, what additional sales would you need to generate that same amount of revenue? And in this case, we'd be looking at a sales increase of around £80,000 or 8%. So put into that context, it is very worthwhile just to reduce your energy overheads and to increase your profitability. So the first section that we'll look at is the split of energy use within the retail sector. And that varies depending on whether you're providing refrigeration or not. So food stores that have refrigeration could see as much as 50% of their energy use going to fridges and freezers. The rest will be split between lighting, heating and other small power. So there you can see there is significant benefit in focusing on the refrigeration for food stores. For non-food stores, the split will be more between heating and lighting. There'll be that basic need to provide heat and light for customers and staff within the space. And again, there'll be a small amount of other energy use on small power and hot water and other equipment within your stores. So firstly, I'm just going to give an overview here. Now there's a lot of information on this slide, but just going to give an overview of short, medium and long-term measures that can be taken in the retail sector. So looking at heating and cooling, in the short term, reducing your temperature set points, checking the operating hours of your controllers and making sure they suit your business needs will provide savings. In the medium term, improving insulation, looking at the location of your heating units, aspects like that can provide improvements. And then the longer term, and in particular the support that the GBF provides, can help you to replace systems such as boiler systems or air conditioning systems. Similarly, on lighting, there's short-term measures that can be taken to ensure lighting's not operating when it's not required, making sure you're getting best use of available natural light, and then again in the longer term looking to replace your inefficient sources with LED technology in particular will be of benefit. On refrigeration, again, simple housekeeping measures, making sure your fridges aren't overcooling, making sure you've got good defrost procedures in place, making good use of night blinds are all easy savings to be had straight away. And then we'll come into this more in the refrigeration section, but looking at your systems, making sure they're in good condition, checking that the pressures are appropriate will all provide general benefits. And again, there's good long-term savings to be had, especially if you have older refrigeration equipment, in moving to more modern equipment which is fitted with efficient fans, LED lights, transparent doors, and operates with generally better performance. Another aspect to think of is your hot water use as well, and simple measure would be to check your hot water flow rates and your tap temperatures to make sure that you're not generating more hot water than needed. Typically we would say that a flow rate of 4 litres per minute will be adequate for hand washing, with a tap temperature of around 40 degrees C recommended. So the first of the major sections that we'll look at is lighting. And we have provided a webinar specifically on lighting. It's available online. It has been recorded, and there's more information there on lighting in general. But within the context of retail, I suppose it's important to remember that LED lighting has now effectively surpassed the performance in terms of energy efficiency of all other sources, and it also provides very good light quality. So the majority of the applications we would see through the Green Business Fund are focused on lighting upgrades, going from metal halide and fluorescent systems, for example, to LED lighting. And in general, you'll be able to see savings there of around 70%. So lighting is important. There's a lot of aspects to consider, especially in the retail space. Firstly, the illumination levels are important. There isn't necessarily a need to overlight the space. It's useful to focus on the products that you are displaying rather than lighting the whole environment to a very high level. Light quality too is important, so making sure you have the right light color, making sure it's not too white or too bright but gives a comfortable environment will be useful. And also color rendering is very important whenever it comes to the display of most retail products, in particular fashion retail and indeed the display of foods. You'll also want to minimize glare from the light sources, and importantly, obviously, you'll want to minimize your energy use overall for the lighting system. So within the retail sector, as I mentioned there, color rendering is essential. You want to make sure that your products are displayed to the best possible standard, and modern LED systems can do this. And it's important to ensure that you specify the correct color temperatures and high standards of color rendering. That will make sure that you're getting the quality of light that you need. The same would apply to food retailing, and again, just making sure that you have the right specification in place will give you a good setup for the retail environment. And again, avoiding over illumination is useful to minimize your energy costs. And also that webinar, it's available there online, specifically on lighting, if you want to pick up more information on it. So the LED solutions, effectively, they have come into use more and more because of their high efficacy. You can see here that they're providing light output in terms of lumens per watt, approaching 150. That surpasses the likes of fluorescent and metal halide solutions. So it means that they're a very efficient way of delivering light. They also have very long lamp life, so they'll typically last 50,000 hours or more, which is much greater than your conventional fluorescent and metal halide technologies. So both those factors combined give a very good business case for upgrading to LED technology, and again, you'll typically see savings of around 70% by moving to LED. And should you look towards a lighting upgrade, other things to consider would be, do you need a redesign? Do you want to change the layout of your existing lighting to improve the performance of the system? A redesign would be possible, and it would be useful to speak to an experienced supplier on that, just to get details of the light levels you'll see across your store, and they can provide that. In terms of the existing wiring, is it adequate? Does it need improvements before you replace your lighting systems? Also, in terms of emergency lighting, is it adequate? Does it need upgraded? And also, do you want to replace all the lighting in your store, or just focus on the retail space? Or do you want to look both at the retail space and the back of house areas? And again, as we touched on earlier, there isn't necessarily a need to overlight a space. It is useful just to think about the key products that you want to highlight. This can be done well with lighting. The use of accent lighting, just to pick up on particular products, can mean that it draws customers' attention to them. And having a contrast in light levels can often be as effective as illuminating across the whole space to a high level. And again, you want to have good light distribution and diffuse lighting across the space. So in summary on lighting, there are a few key things to think of whenever you're focused on energy reduction. The LED light sources can reduce power by as much as 80% overall in some circumstances, especially where you're going from incandescent lighting. So changing your sources, looking to see if you have older, less efficient lighting in place. You typically will, unless you have upgraded your store within the last 5-10 years. In terms of controls, it's useful also to have presence detection. There's no point lighting a space if no one's there. Using presence detection can mean that lighting will switch off in stores or back of house areas whenever it's not required. In terms of daylight, if you have good daylight coming in through roof lights or windows, it's useful to take advantage of that. Daylight sensors can be used in conjunction with your new lighting, and they can help to switch off or dim the lighting whenever you have good levels of natural light. And as we've talked about earlier, we're seeing most projects coming through with savings of around 70% or more, going from conventional lighting to LED light sources in our GBF applications. I'm just going to take a quick look at a case study. Again, it's one that has been supported through the Green Business Fund. It's a company called Collister and Glover. They provide tubes, valves, fittings and pumps in their store. They changed their existing lighting out to LED after support from the Carbon Trust through the Green Business Fund. The project cost there was just over £17,000, and we were able to offer them a capital contribution of £2,500. They were seeing energy savings in this case of 60%, which led to a project payback of just under 5 years. So that they have seen good savings there, and again you can see their comments there on the support that they received from the Carbon Trust. That's something I'll come on to later in terms of the strands of support we offer through the Green Business Fund. Okay, so the next section that we're going to look at, and the next technology use we're going to look at, is heating, ventilation and air conditioning. So again, within the retail context, there's a need to provide a comfortable environment both for your customers and also for your staff. In many cases that can be quite different, especially if customers are coming in for a brief period of time and then leaving the store, and with staff they'll be there all day, so may need different heating requirements from the customers. So your heating and cooling controls are key to achieving this purpose. You also need to consider ventilation to provide the fresh air. And in terms of delivering this, you also need to balance that up against the energy consumption of the associated systems. So you'll be working perhaps in different directions in terms of providing comfort and also minimizing savings. So a balance needs to be struck that provides the optimal comfort at the minimal cost. So simple measure would just be on temperature. For every degree that you're overheating or indeed overcooling with an air conditioning system, your energy costs will rise by about 8%. You can see there in the thermostat it's set to 21 degrees C on the heating controller. That would be higher than we would recommend, and I suppose we would recommend a temperature of around 19 degrees C for heating, and then beyond that obviously you're putting additional work onto the system and additional energy use. There's a range of different ways that heating is delivered. Again, we have a separate specific webinar on HVAC, on heating, ventilation and air conditioning. It focuses on these in more detail, but just to give a brief summary, typically you may well have boiler and radiator systems to provide heat around your offices and indeed around your store. In larger spaces, in warehouses, in retail environments like garden centres and larger DIY stores and the likes, you may well see warm air space heaters often using gas as the heat source. Radiant heating is also used in some circumstances, as well as electric heaters for spaces that maybe aren't utilised that much, and also heat pumps that can provide both heating and cooling in many cases. So as we'll come on to, the efficiency of the source is important, and depending on the type of heating that you have in place, if it is approaching the end of its useful life, then it may well be worth looking at upgrading it to more modern alternatives that will operate at improved efficiency. Similarly with ventilation systems, they come in a range of types. For larger buildings, you can see at the bottom there, centralized air handling units may well be used, and they will combine with heating and cooling systems to provide the needs for your store. These would be seen in larger supermarkets and I suppose larger buildings typically. You may just want to provide air through supply and exhaust fans, or indeed it may be as simple as just having a strategy of opening windows to provide natural ventilation. In terms of air conditioning, I suppose again this is a fairly detailed subject, but just to give an overview, what you'll often find for smaller systems will be localized systems. They'll treat air at the room level. You'll have split air conditioning units, as we'll call them, so we'll have an indoor unit and an outdoor unit. On the larger scale, now there's a lot of jargon on this page, but you may well have VRF or VRV systems, which will be variable refrigerant flow and variable refrigerant volume systems. So they give the option of providing different levels of cooling across a wider area. Getting into the larger scale, you'll have centralized systems. And so they'll integrate into a central plant, as we saw in the previous slide, typically into an air handling unit. And you can have variable air volumes there, the VAV systems, to support the different needs across a building. Again, there's more on this in the HVAC webinar. And just to cover off on it there, there's also a halfway house, really, where you have partially centralized systems. So in that case, you can have the air centrally cooled, and it then has further treatment as it comes into the rooms. And I suppose the overall thing to consider with your air conditioning systems is the age and the condition of them. Again, they'll have a useful life of maybe 12, 15 years at most, and beyond that they're likely to be operating at poor efficiency levels. Another thing to consider on air conditioning is the refrigerated gas type. There has been recent legislation in place that has called for the removal of R22 from use. It's a particular refrigerant gas type that has a damaging effect on the ozone layer. It has been phased out and is no longer in use. There is now further legislation that's focusing on the global warming potential of the refrigerant gases. So you can see here on the table on the right, there are a range of different global warming potentials, or GWPs, and many of the commonly used refrigerant gases have a high GWP. So the move is now towards lower GWP refrigerants, and that's something to bear in mind if you are replacing your air conditioning system. Another consideration will be how your hot water is delivered. Essentially, you may well have a heating boiler which will connect to a cylinder and provide a storage of hot water. That's often not the best way to approach it in a retail environment. There are associated losses with the storage of large volumes of water in cylinders like that. Often going to the type of systems on the right, to the use of a combi boiler system, which will provide hot water on demand, or indeed just simply to electric point of use hot water heaters, can be more effective, where you're just providing small volumes of water for hand washing and the likes. The example on the right there in terms of the point of use hot water heater is perhaps an older example. There's a range of different options you can get there in terms of under sink units and the likes that can integrate into your taps to provide hot water. And again, as we mentioned earlier, looking at your flow rates and also your tap temperatures, just to make sure you're not providing too much flow or too high a temperature on the hot water, will also provide savings. Overall, the controls are important on HVAC systems. Time control, as we mentioned, you'll want to ensure that the systems are linked up to your building operating hours, that they have good time controls in place. As we mentioned earlier, temperature control is important. The use of a deadband where you're not either heating or cooling is very beneficial. We'd recommend here a heating temperature of 19 degrees C and a cooling temperature of 24 degrees C. So essentially, between those two temperatures, you'll neither be heating or cooling your space, which will provide long periods when the systems don't have to operate. The use of weather compensation can also be beneficial, so that you can optimize your building to heat up on particularly cold days in advance of store opening, and then when the weather is warmer, the heating can start much later, providing savings. So in summary then on HVAC, essentially your source is important, your boiler or your air conditioning system. The efficiency will vary significantly depending on the age and the condition of the unit. If you're looking to replacement, you'll want to select the most efficient system possible. So you'll be looking at modern gas condensing boilers with the efficiencies of 95%, and you'll also be looking towards air conditioning systems that have good coefficients of performance that are delivering heating and cooling effectively. So you'll be looking to see a coefficient of performance of more than 3.5. As we just discussed there's no point heating or cooling a space if there's nobody there. Having good time control is important, and making sure that where possible you can use zoning just to heat the areas that need heat during the day. That will also be beneficial. On temperature, again, you want to avoid overheating and overcooling. And for larger systems, you can look towards more advanced control through the use of CO2 sensors, for example, which can determine the occupancy levels of a space and then modulate the ventilation needs, allowing you to reduce energy use overall. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach for retail businesses with regard to HVAC. It'll depend on your business needs, often the type of system that's already in place, and that can vary substantially depending on the type of your business. Okay, so just to look at a case study on HVAC. This case study was for a boiler replacement. The company replaced a 20-year-old boiler which had limited controls and poor levels of efficiency. By bringing in a more efficient boiler and also by improving the controls on it, the company were able to save around $3,600 a year. That gave a project payback of around 4 years, and also the project was able to be supported by a capital contribution of just over £2,000 there. In this instance, the support stemmed from a remote assessment by the Carbon Trust. It was delivered by a Carbon Trust engineer, focusing on a few key measures. The heating was one in particular, given the energy performance of the site. It was operating at around 250 kilowatt hours per metre squared, so that was particularly high, and it was obvious there was opportunities to improve that. So in terms of the overall report that was given, we also recommended LED lighting in that case, and also improved energy management. So that particular organisation was estimated to save 40% of total energy use through basic measures on heating and on lighting. Okay, I'll just provide some more information on the Green Business Fund generally. So the Green Business Fund is operated by the Carbon Trust, and the aim is to contribute to improved sustainability and energy efficiency for SMEs. It's aimed specifically at SMEs in England, Scotland and Wales. It's been operating since the middle of last year, since 2016, and is continuing to run through into 2018. So the fund provides a number of strands of support in terms of advice, training, and also direct financial assistance for capital projects. And again, if we can, we'll aim to continue the scheme longer, and potentially, where possible, there will be options to extend it beyond the UK. So in terms of the current arrangement, the GBF services are available in England, Scotland and Wales. It's eligible to SMEs, small and medium-sized businesses. It's also available to schools, sole traders and charities as well. And in terms of how we define an SME, we're asking that it meets two of the following criteria. So it needs to be less than 250 employees, have an annual turnover of just less than 26 million, and a balance sheet of less than 12.9 million. So as long as two of those three criteria are met, it'll meet the criteria of an SME. And one last thing is that 25% can't be owned by an entity which isn't an SME. So if there's a large business has a controlling interest in your business, it'll not meet the requirements of an SME. So one aspect of support that we offer are the training workshops. We've been running these around the UK. They typically last for about 2 hours. They're delivered directly by Carbon Trust staff, and they help businesses understand their energy consumption. Helps also with the low and no cost measures. They're aimed at companies with less than 50 employees, and so far we've trained over 130 companies across the UK. So there's workshops coming up shortly. There's one in Blackpool next week on the 15th of November, and then one in Sittingbourne on the 22nd of November. The second aspect of support that we offer are the opportunity assessments. We provide these either remotely for companies with a small energy expenditure or on-site for larger energy expenditure. Again, they're all delivered by Carbon Trust engineers, and what we aim to do is to focus on 3 key measures for savings. And again, we talked through a lot of the areas that those are likely to be on within the retail sector. Will then help with the next steps to realise savings and provide a report summarising the potential. Beyond the report, we also provide implementation advice. This can help you match up with a suited accredited supplier who can provide a technology solution for you. We can help run a tender process to help you get competitive prices and quotes, and then also review those prices and quotations as they come back, just to make sure they're giving you the best value in terms of whole life cost. And then whenever it comes to actually making the investment, we offer a capital contribution towards the project. That's available at 15% of project value to a maximum of £5,000. And that applies where the project pays back in 5 years or less. So it's a straightforward process and one again that we can support you with. If you have a project ready to go, you can apply directly at this stage for the capital contribution. It receives a brief financial and technical check before the funding is awarded, and again it's completely non-refundable, so it's a good benefit for a lot of projects. Okay, so just looking then at the final key technology area for retail, and that is refrigeration. So in very basic terms, refrigeration is a process where work is carried out to move heat from one place to another. So as we look here at the refrigeration cycle, what we're trying to do is obviously take the heat out of the products and get it outside. To do that, essentially the heat is absorbed from the products in your fridges that you'll have inside. Compressed refrigerant expands and takes that heat out. That is then rejected back out through condenser units, which are located externally, as you can see in the left, and that condenser is then compressed. Again, the compressors will be outside in your outdoor units, and that allows the cycle to begin again, and that continuous process it provides the transfer of heat effectively. So it's the efficiency of that process that's of key interest, and there are opportunities for savings on all elements of it in terms of your indoor unit, the external condensers and compressors, and also in terms of the maintenance and housekeeping around refrigeration. So this is a fairly typical example of a retail display cabinet. You can see here that it's displaying a range of products. There's a number of things to note. It's not particularly a good example of good performance for a display cabinet. Firstly, there's no riser here at the bottom, so much of the air will spill out of the refrigerated display cabinet into the store. Secondly, as is fairly obvious there, it's a very large fridge. It's open to the store, and as we looked at in the previous diagram, what we're doing within the refrigeration process is absorbing heat from all those products, but it's also open to the store itself, so much of the heat in the store will be absorbed through the fridge, with the refrigeration system needing to do the work to move that heat back outside as well. So we would strongly advocate the use of transparent doors, and they can provide very good savings on retail display cabinets, which minimise the amount of work that your refrigeration system has to do, and ensures that you're only cooling the products, not the store. So on display cabinets in particular, it's useful to bear in mind a few housekeeping aspects. Don't overstock the product. As we looked at in the previous slide, if you're spilling stock over the edges of the refrigeration unit, it's restricting the airflow. The air is designed to flow back in through the grills that you can see here in the front, and if it's overrun with stock, that'll then flow out into the store. Simply as well, don't allow products to warm before they go into the fridge. So if you're receiving refrigerated goods, make sure that they're transferred to the fridges quickly before they're allowed to warm up. The use of night blinds will be beneficial when you're closing up at the end of the day. If you use night blinds, if you have night blinds, make sure that they're used and are routinely brought down at the end of the day. Also, simply switching off the lights and the anti-condensation heaters within the units will be beneficial, and checking the defrost settings as well. In terms of maintenance and low-cost measures, good cleaning will be beneficial, making sure that the night blinds are in good condition, and looking again at the controls, making sure the system is set up effectively for your needs. And then more generally, if you do have an older cabinet, I think again, as we've discussed, particularly with HVAC systems, and the same thing would apply to refrigeration, where your refrigeration units are maybe 10, 12 years old, they'll be running on less efficient technology, and it'll be beneficial to look at replacement of both the cabinets and indeed the outdoor units as well. So looking towards systems that have LED lighting, transparent doors, high efficiency fans will be beneficial. And as you can see there on the chart on the right, there's a summary of the impact of all of these measures. So there's great opportunity when you do come to invest in a new cabinet to make sure that it's operating with the best efficiency levels. The evaporators is maybe hard to see within the display cabinets. This is an example here from a cold room, but you can see what can happen around your evaporators as they cool the product. They can frost up, as you can see on the left. So again, the good housekeeping to make sure that they're kept clean, free of frost, will allow them to operate more effectively. Then whenever it comes to the outdoor units, the condensers and compressors, I suppose they're often an unloved item. You can see here a couple of examples of the outdoor units for refrigeration systems in the retail environment. They're generally tucked away at the back of the building. There can be issues with vegetation growing around them, stock or equipment sitting around them as well. So consideration to the location of these units will be beneficial, and making sure that they're clean and free of debris will help the overall operation of the condensers and the compressors. The condensers in particular, you can see here the picture on the right is an example of bad practice. The build-up of dirt and debris on the condenser can have a significant impact on performance. Blocking the condensers increases the temperature by in around 1 to 2 degrees, which loses about 4% in the energy use of the system, or more if it's in particularly bad condition. So it's important to keep them clean, free of leaves, litter and vegetation, and make sure that they're well maintained. And again, the likes of the fins and the filters need to be professionally cleaned and maintained. when it comes to the compressor operation, one of the key things is your condensing temperature, and you'll be aiming to set this as low as possible. If you have a multi-compressor system, this will apply to your suction pressure overall. But I suppose the important principle is probably summed up in this example. So often refrigeration equipment is specified for the European market, so it'll be equally as suited to operating in southern Spain as it will be here in the UK. So quite often your condensing temperature, as you can see here in the chart on the right, may well be set as high as 40 degrees C, and that'll stay there all year round. So effectively your mean daily temperatures will be much lower here in the UK, as you can see in the bottom chart. So bringing that condensing temperature down to typical levels of around 20 degrees C will allow your refrigeration system to do the work that it needs during the winter and spring months. As it comes into the summer months, that will need to be allowed to float up and to provide the cooling needed during the summer months. But essentially, for every degree that you can reduce that condensing temperature, you'll save around 4% of the compressor's energy use. So it's a very important thing to speak to your maintenance contractor on whenever it comes to your routine maintenance of your compressor. If that can be reduced by changing the head pressure controls, then you can see significant savings in your existing refrigeration equipment. Again, if it comes to older equipment that is maybe approaching the end of its life, it'll be beneficial to look at replacement options to go towards new systems, and potentially to look at centralized systems where you have larger sites. You can also build in other options such as using heat recovery to provide hot water to your store from the refrigeration systems. So that really would be a longer term investment measure for the refrigeration systems. So just to summarize then on refrigeration, there's a range of simple measures that can be put in place in terms of stocking, use of night blinds, switching off the lights and the anti-condensation heaters on the systems. In terms of routine maintenance, making sure the refrigeration pipework is well insulated, making sure that the external condensers are clean and free from obstruction, and also, as we've just discussed, reviewing those condensing temperatures with an experienced maintenance contractor will help provide good savings. And then whenever it comes to replacement, you should look at the whole life cost of the system, and also look towards the key measures that we discussed earlier on display cabinets, things like using transparent doors, high efficiency fans, LED lighting, and again on the outdoor units, looking to maximize the efficiency of the units, and also looking towards centralized systems where you have a number of refrigeration systems in place. So it is one of the areas where there is significant potential for saving. So quite often you can see savings of 40% or more of your refrigeration energy use. And as we looked at in the charts earlier, refrigeration is often a very high proportion of energy use for food retailers. So it's one area that certainly is useful to pay some attention to and to focus on for your energy savings. Okay, and we'll just take a look here at a case study on refrigeration. Again, this is another area that we provided implementation advice to a SME. We helped with the specification of a low energy refrigeration system, offered that out to tender to a number of refrigeration suppliers under the Green Business Directory, and then once they provided proposals, we reviewed those and looked at the best solutions in terms of the whole life cost for the customer. So in this case, they were able to replace their entire system with a more modern system which included intelligent defrost controls, which allowed them to improve the head pressures that we discussed earlier. And they also then were able to introduce transparent doors, high efficiency fans, and LED lighting. So I suppose the headline there is that they were able to save 40% on their energy savings in around 1,200 a year. The new cabinets and external units cost £8,800, and we were able to offer a capital contribution of £900 towards that. Overall project payback was 7 years, and I suppose as well as the energy benefit there, the store obviously benefited from the new refrigeration system, which again, I think in this case was approaching the end of its useful life.